Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast. From still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me behind enemy lines, he's still got red on, but we might get a go balls out of him at some point in this very program. It's former UGA great NFL running back Keith Marshall from the Players Lounge, CEO, and my boss, Keith. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Excited to join the show. You're not going to get a go Vols out of me, but obviously very happy to be part of this with you. We do some work at Tennessee, and big fan of the fan base outside of when they play my Dogs.
Well, that's gonna be here in a couple weeks. We'll see each other in person, and we'll see how all that goes. And yeah, man, that'll be here before you know it. It's gonna be cold. It's my guess. It's always cold now. That game is. I gotta be bundled up.
Yeah, late November. That's what it is. Football weather. So
yeah. Well, you say, you know what's funny about that? Like, because people say that. Do you enjoy being like playing in cold weather? Like when we talk about like actual football weather, or would you rather play in the heat? Because a lot of people are worried about the heat aspect and just overheating. Or did you prefer that?
I guess, there's a point where it goes from, bearable to non-bearable. So I would always say heat. My personal situation, I had like different elements, stuff, knees. And so the warmer I could get with, the better I would feel. So in the heat of the summer, I was good. But when it's cold, joints start to get a little stiff, hurts a little bit more to get hit, catch the ball. So the colder it got, the least, or I guess the less and less I enjoyed ball, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, first thing, because we got to talk Tennessee here a little bit, Keith, and I'm going to pick your brain on just being a great running back for so many years and knowing the position inside and out. I wanted to pick your brain on just because Dylan Sampson's having a different kind of year for Tennessee, and it's something that I didn't anticipate just based on where Jalen Wright was a year ago. He goes in the middle rounds. He's having a good year for the Dolphins, and I think he's been the most complete back at Tennessee to this point, and I thought there'd be a slight drop-off. And there really hasn't, especially with the offensive line that Dylan Sampson's had to deal with and getting hit at the line of scrimmage. It's just been he's earning every little bit at Tennessee this year. But I wanted to, like, now that you've seen a lot of it and we're working together, you're involved in Tennessee, and you've seen that Heupel offense for a couple of years now. Jalen Wright last year, North Carolina guy. You're a North Carolina guy. You see, Tion Evans that freshman year, Jabari Small in the NFL now. Like a lot of people think offense pass. This is a pass first scheme at Tennessee, but they run the ball really well, and it's obviously light boxes, and they spread you out, this, that, and the other. Thinking back to high school Keith, would this offense have intrigued you? Would you have enjoyed playing in this offense if this was the offense Georgia had?
I would say absolutely, man. If you look at kind of what you just went through over the course of the last year, the guys that have been a part of the program, that have had success in college, that have now gone on to get drafted and are having success in the league, I think that is exactly what you are looking for in terms of somebody, as a high school player looking to where he wants to go play ball. And then you look at what my man is doing this year, and, they're featuring him in a way in which, a lot of running backs don't get the opportunity to feature nowadays, scoring all kind of touchdowns, getting to play in big, obviously, games in an amazing environment. So, yeah, it would have been right up my alley for sure.
Do you, when you look at the light boxes aspect to it, like, what do you think, how do you go into that situation versus more the pro style that you're running at Georgia back in the day? Is what's different about it as a running back and how you attack it?
Well, there's obviously more space, and the matchups are a little bit more favorable when you can get to that second line of defense without having to have as much junk. You have an opportunity to break. Somebody like me, I was somebody that wanted to get to the second level and then be able to, once I got there, I felt like, okay, it's on. And so the higher the percentage chance that I could get there, I would have been excited about it. So there's no question. It reminds me of like back in the day when we used to watch Oregon when they first kind of introduced the spread, and they had all those running backs down there, and they weren't, the guys that Tennessee has not really comparable. They're much more brute type of running backs, can run the ball in between the tackles, but they had a lot of space, and so you saw a lot of lanes, a lot of opportunities to get big runs, chunk plays, which really don't see as much, I feel like, now from the running back position as we were accustomed to. So I would have, like I said, I definitely would have been a fan of it.
What about tempo? Like Tennessee obviously doesn't rotate backs on a drive. Like if you're in on one drive at Tennessee, you're in for that entire drive. If it goes 13 plays, 7 plays, whatever, would that have been intimidating for you? Or as a running back, you were like, no, that's awesome. I want to be on the field for the entire drive.
It's an interesting question because coming out of high school, or really just forever, we never subbed running backs out. You were in. I played game and played every snap. And then you get to college, and we did begin to sub more. And obviously, you had kind of special packages in place for certain people. But I think maybe if you were accustomed to, I do 4 or 5 plays at a time, come at somebody else goes in, then maybe it's a bigger challenge. But I mean, most guys, the way that they come up, you're playing. And so I don't think that you would view it as some type of a challenge. In fact, I think it's a benefit. Like, as you get longer into those drives and you're 10 plays in, defensive line is tired. You're not giving them a chance to sub in and out. They're not going to get us off the ball, or they're not going to be able to get off the blocks the same. So that's kind of a running back's dream.
What does Dylan Sampson remind you of? Does he remind you of yourself at all and how he attacks?
No, I think he's probably a little bit more physical than I was. Especially, he's older than, most of my success at Georgia was earlier on in my career, but he strikes me as a very, very balanced running back. Obviously makes the big plays, but he's a brute. He's lowering the shoulder and, getting those yak yards. So I'm trying to think of what a comparison would be. I had to think about that. He kind of reminds me of the guy Marshawn Lloyd a little bit, that was at Southern California last year from South Carolina. I'm trying to think. I don't know if I can do a one-to-one comparison, but I don't think our play styles were really that similar.
Yeah, I think you're more like Jalen Wright last year. And then you talk about getting to the second level. He was just so, once you got to the second level of Jalen, it was just because he was a track guy first, right? Like he put on a lot of size over the years at Tennessee. And he was like an all-time great 3-star success story at Tennessee, because he turned into a feature back last year. But his role gradually expanded over the course of 3 seasons, but he put on the size, he put on the weight, and he kept his speed. Did you, as a running back, is that something you always have to like kind of be wary of as you get stronger, going from high school to the college weight room and the calories and everything you're eating, to like, yeah, I understand like the coaches want me to put on weight so I get injured less and can take the hits at the college level, but I also want to maintain my speed because you were a speed first guy. Was that hard?
Funny, I wouldn't say it was hard. At the time, you kind of did what was called for and asked of you. I do think that, now in retrospect, I would have approached it differently. I was always somebody, to your point, that I think what made me special was I was fast. Like once I was going to catch me, I wasn't the biggest guy. I did put on weight, and I had a big frame so that I could grow into it, but I think I probably did that a little bit too fast in college. And then like in the off seasons, the training were very much tailored towards, strength and conditioning for football. Whereas the way I grew up, it was like we were on the track all summer. And so I was maintaining that track speed as well. So if I could go back and do it again, I think I would have approached it a little bit different and really leaned into what, differentiated me. But again, I think at the time, strength and conditioning programs were a little bit cookie cutter. Everybody did the same thing. It wasn't like, hey, you have this type of physique or you're this type of an athlete as a running back, so you need to have this tailored type of a program. We got into that more once we got to the NFL, but in college, everybody was doing the same thing. So, I did that stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. Was there anything that changed for you in terms of like what you learned like early on versus later on at Georgia in terms of your like off-season program to like balance that out?
No, and then especially me. So one of the, my backstories, I had pretty significant knee injury actually in Knoxville, but even before that, I had really bad tendonitis, and so it was something that I managed, starting my senior year in high school, and and so I had a little bit of a unique training regimen in comparison to some of the other guys in terms of a lot of the rehab that I had to do, but. Again, like I think some of that could have been avoided if I would have had a different training program altogether that was kind of more specialized to some of the things that I was dealing with. And so in terms of like taking care of my body, I got more cognizant over, how do you eat? How do you recover? Because, we had people in the program that were teaching us those things. But in terms of the actual work itself, I mean, we did what the coaches had on the board to do that day,
What was the hardest thing to cut out in terms of eating? Have you always eaten clean, or were there things you were like, nah, absolutely not. This is staying with me.
I didn't eat great in college. I didn't really start to do it because we had like, and now it's much more structured. So whenever I was there, it was like we got to go to the dining hall. I mean, in dining hall, they had everything on. So, every day I would get pizza, chicken wings, tater tots. Like I was not
every day.
More than I should have. I used to love I mean, you got to think we were working out like crazy too, but
yeah.
I used to love omelets, so I would get those once or twice a day. And like I said, we were earning that food. But
you're like the Rock over here, where you like the Rock's daily itinerary. This is sounded like the Rock here in terms of your caloric intake.
I could have did better. Like the one thing that I was very disciplined. I worked my tail off. I did everything people asked of me, but I did not because it wasn't like taught into me growing up. I was telling people this, like in high school, what I would do is, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense now. But, to eat healthy. So I used to always go to Bojangles, North Carolina kid, Bojangles. Yeah.
What's your Bojangles order?
Well, I used to get the 3-piece white meat chicken dinner, right?
Okay.
And so when me eating healthy was getting the white meat instead of the dark meat. It's still fried. I don't know why, but that's what I thought was. So as you can see, I was a little bit off in that category.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it feels like now, like everyone is just so regimented. Like it just seems like everything is just like kids are taking care of their diet at a younger and younger age where they're just so prepared for it.
It's such a big part of it, though. That's what I'm saying. I definitely feel like, I wish I would have paid more attention. And like once I got towards probably like my junior, senior year at Georgia, they brought in a nutritionist and we started having track table. And so you started doing testing to see what you needed. So I was kind of in that transition period to where it is now, to where like, when I got to leave, we did a blood test and you knew, these are the foods you can eat. These are the foods that are going to, reduce swelling. These are the foods that are going to, lead to swelling. Like this is how you recover. Like it became actually a part of the craft, which was new for me,
Yeah. When you think of, because this is something I've thought a lot about with Kerryon Johnson at Auburn in 2016. I think he had one of the more forgotten great seasons for that Auburn team and what he did with Stidham and company. And they beat Alabama, they beat Georgia, they get Georgia again in the SEC title game. And Kerryon is by that point really beat up and is not able to carry the load come tournament time or come SEC title time. Something I've wondered about with Sampson at this point is he's already passed Jalen Wright's entire carry total last season. And we still have 5 games to go for Tennessee. He just came off a 26 carry game 2 weeks ago. He's having a Heisman type season for Tennessee. But I look at it, I guess, just because of how much we've learned about running backs and how much it kind of reminds me of baseball in a way, where you're managing pitch counts. The way you look at running backs now, you're worried about just the carry count. And that's kind of been in the back of my mind. Is that something that even when you were in just a star-studded backfield at Georgia that y'all were always mindful of? Did you ever think like, yeah, even if I was the guy, if I transferred somewhere else early on and I was like, I'm the guy at, I don't know, North Carolina, South Carolina, and I'm getting 25, 30 carries. Is that something you actually wanted? And is that something running backs actually want at this point?
That's a question. I wouldn't say it was something that like I wanted from the perspective of something that I sucked out. I didn't seek it out. You know what I mean? I do think though that it was like, hey, we're sharing the load a little bit. I'm probably getting half the carries I would get elsewhere. The goal is to get to the league and get paid. Now, obviously, they're getting paid in college now, so I think that changes the conversation. But the goal was always to get to the league, and it was like, okay, I can I can show off my skills. We're competitive as a team. We're winning. It's working. You know what I mean? And I'm not taking as many hits as I would. And I do feel like at running back, but really at any position, you only have so much tread on your tire. And so I think it can be framed in a way that is positive. But on the flip side, I think the downside of that is like as a running back, it is very much a field game. And so there's some type of backs, like you think of the Derrick Henrys of the world, or like the Mark Ingrams, Trent Richardson, like their game is not that they're super explosive. They're going to get in, have 10 carries and go break. The game is, hey, I'm going to wear on this defense because they're going to have to tackle me over and over. And by the time we get to the fourth quarter, they're not going to do that anymore. Yeah. And I think the reverse of that is like you do, get into a rhythm as a running back to where you just kind of feel in the game, you kind of get into that flow state. And if it's too, sporadic in terms of the carries that you're getting, it's harder to get into that flow. So, I would say like kind of in real time, I want as many carries as I can get. But obviously, if you back up and say, hey, what's better for me over the course of my career? It's like, well, I want to, have as long as career as possible. So
is that something coaches talk about where it's like, hey, you're at X amount of carries right now if you're too much, or like that? Is that not really on their radar?
I think it's one of those things where if you're in a position, for example, like we were at Georgia, where, they can frame it that way because there is some reality to it. And they can basically spin you not getting as many carries and as much PT in a way that's positive. But if you're in a situation like with Sampson, where he's the guy, I guarantee they're not going up there and saying, hey, we're going to try to save you for the next game. It's like, no, we need you to win. Like you are, you're what, you're kind of the core of our offense. You set up the passing game. It's like we used to say the team goes as we go. And we had 3 or 4 guys, but like that's kind of the same way that Tennessee sets up their offense. It is run first, and then they build the passing game around that. So I don't know who's behind him and how they feel about him, but I doubt the coach are going to say, hey, we're going to limit you if we need you.
Especially now at this point, right? Because he's gotten you this far, and that's what I wonder about down the stretch here. Is like, how do you go back on that a little bit?
And you mentioned, kids in the conversation. I think he's probably a long shot, but if he were to have a couple crazy games, like y'all come to Athens, if he goes off and a couple more games, it's like he's in the Heisman conversation statistically. Like, do you take that away from a kid?
Yeah.
Not. You know what I'm saying? That's you can live off that the rest of your life. That's, one in a million. So it's an interesting spot for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a right answer here. And I think that's the complicated part. Is like I understand if Dylan is like, nah, I'm good. We'll go 26 carries. I want to push for the Heisman. I want to get us to 11-1. I want to beat Georgia, this, that, and the other. But then on the flip side, I would understand it too if you were like, hey, using this bye week with Kentucky, they've got 2 NFL guys with Weaver and Walker on the defensive line. Like he's gonna get hit, and he's gonna take some shots where you're like, I would understand if he was like, hey, we got to start like rotating a little bit more because you got talent behind him too.
Well, that's the other part. I think the other part of the conversation is, although you're the ball carrier, you're the one but like, it is a team sport, and so you removing yourself from the equation potentially hurts the rest of the team. They're busting their tails up front to create those blocking lanes and all those things. And it's like if you're the best guy on the team to take advantage of those opportunities for the team, I think it could be looked at negatively for you to say, hey, I need to be on a pitch count so I can save myself for the future. I do think it's a it can be a delicate situation. And to your point, I don't know that there's a right or a wrong answer.
How did you, Todd, Nick, Sonny talk about the running back rotation in your Georgia days? Is that something that came up between y'all? Did y'all ever talk about it?
Not really. I mean, it was coach defined it. You know what I'm saying? It would be like, Todd went in first and we would rotate series. You know what I mean? And there would be times where there were certain packages where, like we knew we would do like a stampede, which is like 4 plays back to back. And it's like, Keith, you have to P, and there might be some screen, so there were some things like that built into it. But for the most part, it was like, it's your series. You go, you get tired, you tap out. And once you tap out, you lose the series unless someone taps out. So you don't really want to tap out,
Interesting. So that's different because that's obviously not like, I mean, you just saw that at quarterback this week with Anthony Richardson with the Colts tapping out. We've never seen a quarterback tap out after a big play. And now they're going.
Yeah, I think it's different at running back because the whole offense is not as and when you have other guys behind you that it's like, hey, if I know, they're just as capable. So like if you're fresh, come do your thing. So yeah.
Is it harder to know, like, because if you're going in after Todd or you, like, depending on what the injuries report looks like that week, I mean, is it hard for you to stay not fresh, but like to get in a good rhythm? Because I don't know how much of running back is just rhythm based. From the outside, I would assume there's a lot of rhythm to it, but did that make it more complicated for you?
Absolutely. I definitely feel like you missed that piece of it to where, you get into that flow. I mean, again, I think if people that play the position would understand, it's probably the same at other positions or in other crafts in general. Like there are points and times where you're just in it. You know what I mean? That state. And I think if you disrupt it, you disrupt it. And it's harder to get to that point when you're going in and out, which is why we would do the series. It's like you have the series. You know what I mean? This is your series. And then again, if you tap out, you kind of give it up. But it definitely was more difficult to get into that rhythm when you were, subbing it out.
What do you think goes into keeping a running back just like, what's the best way of just keeping a running back as healthy and as active and as comfortable throughout the course of the season? What did you find and what have you seen from that position over the years and how it's changed a little bit? What would your advice be in that
I would say, really 2 main things and then potentially a third, but off season, 1, getting your body prepared. It's a long season. That's why we go through the strength and training, and it's why it's as regimented and difficult as it is. So, making sure you're prepared and obviously maintaining some of that throughout the season so that your body is not relapsing in terms of the strength and some of those things that you're working on. And the second piece, and our coaches did a good job of this, was making sure you're doing your recovery. So, I mean, we were cold tub, hot tub after practice. Before practice, I would go in and get my treatment. You would get your stretching. You would, kind of do some prehab to try to prevent any things that were, potential injuries that would come from just overuse. So I think those 2 things are important. And then, the third piece that we did earlier on is, once we got into the depth of the season, practice was more about the mental side of it. So, you were going to play X amount of snaps, and particularly at running back position, because we were getting hurt. Like we may only do the scout team period. They don't do this anymore at Georgia. Now Georgia is good on good, but like back then it was like if you're one of the guys and like we know what you can do. You know what I mean? When it was scout period, you were kind of doing the game plan stuff like that. You were not doing the good on good practices and getting beat up during the week. So I think that helped as well.
Final 2 quick ones here for you, Keith. This is kind of a 2-parter though, because one of the things I see, like I know the game pretty well, but there's still things I miss where it's like it's so hard to know whose assignment is what in pass protection. Like even when you're looking at all 22 or anything else, it's still hard without asking the coaches or the players, honestly, just straight up like whose responsibility was who. I think one of the things that fans look on from the outside is, player X missed the block, or Sampson missed the block here, and that's why Nico got hit, or Keith missed the block, and that's why Aaron got hit. What's something that you see that fans miss in terms of pass protection for running backs, and what makes it hard for some guys to acclimate to becoming a good pass protector at the running back position in the college level?
I think so. I don't know what it's an interesting question in terms of what fans miss. I can't really answer that, but I can tell you that the difficult part is really two different pieces. Because one, there's the identification piece, where there's different protections are kind of asking more of running backs. So if you have a slide protection, you just go and you cut off the end man line of scrimmage. That's easy. You could do that. But if you're having to say, hey, everybody except for the 5 men that the line have, and then you're having to scan side to side, and they're bringing delayed pressure, like there's a little bit more that goes into that. And so it's being good with your eyes, understanding like the rotation of the backs and where pressure can come from. And I think that is just practice reps, watching film, and over time getting it. So I do think it can be difficult, but I know, the way that you scheme up blocking schemes, like the offense coordinator, the offensive line, the coach, whatever, they can scheme it up to try to protect a running back if he's super young or something of that nature. Then I would say the second piece that is difficult is actually doing it. It's one thing to identify. It's another thing that you got somebody coming in the A gap, 245 pounds, running full speed, going up and smacking them, getting your hands in the right, position, stopping it. That's a different challenge. And so I will not say that pass protection is the super easy to do. I mean, I got good at it over time because of reps. You know what I mean?
Was there a guy, a welcome to the SEC moment in the A gap coming up the middle? You're like, oh, okay, this is different.
Because we did so much of it in practice. Like, to be honest, you wouldn't get in if you couldn't. You know what I mean? Like, if you were not able to, you just wouldn't play. So it was kind of like, that's table stakes. You got to be able to protect. You got to be able to identify. Doesn't mean you always win, but even if you get a good bang on a guy, and it delays it half a second, like that could be all that the quarterback needs to get the ball out. So, it was like, I don't know that I never got like, I'm sure in practice, I got bull rush and things like that, but in the game, I don't think I ever got, if you will. I got a couple people for sure.
Did you like that?
Did I like what?
Like when you get somebody in pass pro, is that something as a running back, you're just like, you get fired up, you're like, that, there we go. I like that I did that.
For sure, but it's not like I wasn't excited, like, oh yeah, I know this got double A, got pressure. I'm at the, do your job. Like, I mean, that's what you get. We weren't getting paid at the time, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, that's part of your responsibility, so you do it. But it's not the fun part of football.
Absolutely. Final one here for you, Keith. Now that you've seen like so many years, like post playing versus what you saw coming into it, like how much has the running back position as a former running back changed when you're watching college football now versus what it was like a decade ago almost?
I think it's changed significantly. And I have my theories, in terms of the overall landscape of college sports and how that's helped, or not really helped, but how that's, been a part of the transition. But, one of the things that we've been talking about now is when I was getting recruited, it was, you're going to go somewhere and be the guy. If you're a 5-star coming out, you want to go be the guy. I think, like, honestly, like me and Ty kind of broke the mold going to Georgia together and saying, hey, we're going to do this together. And then Nick and Sony came, and then you started to see more and more of guys saying, hey, we'll go play with other top guys. And so I think, that's something that's changed, is where, right now you're telling me guys getting 20 carries a game, that this is load too heavy. That's used to be what you expect, what I mean, 20 carries a game. So I think that certainly changed. I think part of that, and the reason you see so much rotation, it's not just about running backs, it's around a lot of positions, particularly defensively, is because you got this transfer portal now. And so, like, if guys are not playing, they're going to hit the portal. And so I think you rotate more bodies in, keep people happy, help manage the roster. And then I think schematically, the position has changed significantly. We used to be 7 yards back in the dot. That was my, because I had time to read, react, set the defense up. Now it seems like most of the running games is really from the shotgun, where you don't have that same ability to kind of set defenders up, set the second level blocks up, really time to read and fill out a play. It's really, you kind of hit or bounce. Like it's much quicker decision that you're making. And so personally, like my favorite runs were always, outside to mid zone, because I was able to get the flow and then cut it back. That's not, it's just not the game anymore. We ran a lot of like boss, toss, sweep, power, like from the gun. Like we just don't see any of that anymore, even at UGA. So it's definitely a different game schematically.
Could it come back, or no? Is it just gone?
I'm not sure, man. I'm sure it could come back. I don't know. I'm not, like, I guess, studied enough to know why that transition has happened. You know what I mean? I'm sure that there's some deeper level insight as to like why offenses have gone, schematically into a, whether it's responding to the defensive fronts or taking advantage of, different personnel packages. Like I'm sure there's a reason behind the why that has happened. And so much more.
My gut is like the offensive lines are just getting worse. I don't know. That's my gut read on it.
Yeah, it may be. I really don't know.
I don't know. Keith Marshall, thank you so much for the time, sir. Anything you want to plug here? Go subscribe Players Lounge today. Go subscribe at the Georgia fans. For the Georgia fans listening here, we got Dog Central and TPL Georgia for the athlete shows and everything else. But what do you want to plug here specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if I know my dog fans very well, they're not listening to your podcast, man. So we'll focus on the good work that you're doing over at TPL Tennessee /Vols. We're in the process of doing the rebrand. So obviously you do a great job following the program, athlete content we're really proud of. So definitely go check that out. And yeah, man, just excited to be a part of this.
There you go. Keith, thank you so much for the time, sir. I greatly appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Have a good one, man.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.